The message arrived late at night. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about the trip. We've decided to push it to next year." I stared at my screen, my stomach sinking. Postponed? We'd spent months planning this vacation, our first family getaway in years. I had rearranged my work schedule, stretched every dollar to make it work, and crossed off the days like a kid waiting for Christmas morning. Without thinking, I called my mom. She answered with a sigh. "Claire, I know you're upset, but things are just tight right now. We can't afford it." I swallowed hard. I understood financial struggles. I really did. I had been picking up extra shifts at the cafe, even offering to pay my own airfare just to make this trip happen. But the way she said it, like the decision was final, like my feelings weren't even a factor, stung like a slap. I took a breath, forcing my voice to stay level. If it's about money, maybe we could find a cheaper hotel. Or shorten the trip. She hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. I caught it. "Claire," she said gently, "it's just not the right time. We'll do it next year. I promise." A promise. One I should have known better than to believe. 2 days later, I was scrolling through Facebook on my lunch break when my heart stopped. There it was, a photo of my parents on a beach. Sun-kissed, drinks in hand, the ocean stretching behind them, sparkling in the afternoon light. I gripped my phone tighter and kept scrolling. More photos. My brother Ryan with his girlfriend on a boat. My parents laughing over plates of lobster at a seaside restaurant. And then the caption that made my blood run cold. "Family time is priceless." Family time. And yet, somehow, I wasn't included. The trip hadn't been postponed, they had just decided I wasn't a part of it. I locked my phone and sat frozen at the cafe counter, my mind racing. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. Maybe it was a last-minute work opportunity. Maybe someone had gifted them the trip. But deep down, I already knew. They hadn't rescheduled anything. They had simply chosen to leave me out. That night, I didn't call my mom. I didn't comment on the post. Instead, I watched in silence as more photos flooded in over the next few days. They went snorkeling. They had bonfires on the beach. They made memories without me. And as I stared at each picture, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about the trip. This was about every time I had been an afterthought. Every birthday they had forgotten. Every holiday where Ryan got exactly what he wanted, while my gifts felt like last-minute leftovers. Every sacrifice I had made for them, ones they never once made for me. I clenched my jaw, breathing deeply. They thought I'd be too hurt to say anything. That I would just swallow the pain, like always. But this time, I was done being the forgotten one. They had no idea I had seen the pictures. So when they walked through the door a week later, I was ready. And I had a plan. I heard the taxi pull into the driveway and watched from the kitchen window as my mom, dad, and Ryan stepped out, dragging their suitcases behind them. They looked exhausted but happy. Sun-kissed from their postponed trip. I forced my expression to stay neutral. Stay calm. They still didn't know I knew. The front door swung open, and my mom's voice rang out, bright and chipper. "Claire," she beamed. "Oh, sweetheart. I missed you. How have you been?" I crossed my arms. "Busy," I said flatly. My dad stepped inside, setting his bags down. "That's good. How's work?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. Work. That was all I had done. Work and scroll through their perfect vacation, pretending I didn't exist. Ryan yawned, stretching his arms. "Man, I'm exhausted. Traveling takes it out of you." He smirked at me. "Hope you held down the fort while we were gone." My eye snapped to him. While we were gone. Like it was normal. Like nothing was wrong. Like I hadn't spent the last week replaying their betrayal, over and over. I inhaled deeply. No more pretending. I turned to my mom, my voice calm, eerily so. "So, how was the trip?" She blinked, pausing for just a moment. "Oh, well, we just needed a little getaway. Nothing too special." Liar. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and turned the screen toward them. The beach selfie. The boat ride. The fancy dinner. And the caption that made my stomach turn all over again. "Family time is priceless." I tilted my head. "Looks pretty special to me." Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Then, my mom let out a nervous chuckle. Claire, I don't. My voice cut through hers, sharp, cold. Just don't. My dad cleared his throat. Look, sweetheart, it wasn't. Stop. My voice rose. Just tell me the truth. You never postponed the trip. You just didn't want me there. My mom's face flickered with guilt before she quickly masked it with weak justifications. It wasn't like that, honey. We just thought. What? I snapped. That I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't see the pictures? That I'd be stupid enough to believe your lie? Ryan groaned, rolling his eyes. Oh my God, Claire. Are you seriously making this a big deal? A big deal? I clenched my fists. Just a trip? The words hit like a slap. The trip I planned. The one I saved up for. The one I was supposed to be a part of. I shook my head, exhaling sharply. You could have just told me the truth. But instead, you lied. You made me feel like I wasn't even worth inviting. Ryan scoffed, rolling his eyes. God, Claire, you're being so dramatic. A bitter laugh escaped me. No, Ryan. I'm finally being honest. My mom stepped forward, reaching for my hand. Claire, please. I pulled away. Not this time. They needed to hear this. This isn't just about the trip, I said, my voice steady but sharp. It's about every single time I've been treated like I don't matter. Every holiday where Ryan got exactly what he wanted, while I got whatever was easiest. Every time I put you first and you didn't even notice. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to keep going. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I gave enough, I'd finally be enough for you. But I never was I? Silence. No one had an answer for that. Finally, my mom sighed. Claire, it's not like we love Ryan more than you. I gave a small, hollow smile. Maybe you don't. But it sure feels that way. Another silence. And that was all the confirmation I needed. I nodded, exhaling sharply. Got it. Without another word, I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door. Claire, where are you going? My dad called. I didn't look back. Somewhere I'm actually wanted. And then I left. For the first time in my life, I put myself first. For days, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls. Messages. A constant stream of attempts to pull me back in. But I was done being the one who fixed things. This time, they could figure it out without me. I ignored their calls. Left their messages unread. And for once, I didn't feel the urge to smooth things over. At first, it felt strange, ignoring them. Guilt crept in like an old habit, whispering in the back of my mind. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe you should just let it go. But then I'd remember. The text telling me the trip was postponed. The Facebook posts of them laughing, making memories without me. The way they had lied without hesitation. And suddenly, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like freedom. By the 5th day, their messages started to change. At first, they were firm. Dismissive. Trying to re-establish control. Mom, Claire, we need to talk about this. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. Dad, ignoring us won't change anything. Call your mother. Ryan, Jesus, Claire, get over it. You're acting like a child. I rolled my eyes. Classic. They weren't sorry. They just wanted me to stop making them uncomfortable. But when I still didn't respond, the tone shifted. Mom, sweetheart, please. We miss you. We never meant to hurt you. Dad, we should have handled things differently. Let's talk. And then the one that nearly got me. Mom, Claire, I feel awful. I can't sleep knowing you're upset with us. For a moment, I almost responded. Almost. But then I asked myself one simple question. If I had never seen the photos, would they have told me the truth? Would they have felt guilty at all? The answer was painfully clear. I locked my phone and let the silence continue. It wasn't easy at first. For years, I had been the one to reach out first. The one to patch things up. The one who made excuses for them. So holding my boundary, sitting in the silence, felt unnatural. But the longer it lasted, the more I realized something. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They were reaching out because they missed the role I played in their lives. The fixer. The peacekeeper. The afterthought who never made waves. Now that I refused to be that person, they didn't know what to do. A week after they came home, I did something I had never done before. I booked a trip. Nothing extravagant, just a quiet cabin in the mountains, far away from everything. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and left. No explanations. No asking for permission. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting to be included. I was choosing myself. And it felt incredible. When I got back, my phone was full of missed calls and unread messages. But I didn't rush to respond. I wasn't ready yet. Because for once, I was putting myself first, and I wanted to enjoy the feeling a little longer. They weren't used to me ignoring them. So when my silence lasted longer than they expected, they showed up. And I was ready. I had known it was coming. The moment I stopped answering, I knew my parents wouldn't just let it go. So when I heard the knock on my door that Saturday afternoon, I wasn't surprised. I took a deep breath, setting down my coffee. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't racing. I was ready. I opened the door to find my mom and dad standing there. They looked different. Not angry. Not smug. Not demanding. They looked nervous. "Claire," my mom said softly, tucking her purse under her arm. "Can we come in?" I leaned against the door frame. "Depends," I said evenly. "Are you here to actually listen? Or just to tell me why I'm wrong for being upset?" My dad sighed. "We're here to talk. Really talk." I studied their faces. They weren't demanding to be let in. They weren't dismissing my feelings like they had in their messages. Maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. They were asking. That was new. I stepped aside. "Fine," I said, my voice measured. "Come in." I led them into the living room, where the air hung thick with unspoken words. My mom lowered herself onto the couch, folding her hands in her lap, while my dad remained standing, shifting his weight like he wasn't sure if he belonged. I sat across from them, arms crossed, waiting. It was my mom who finally spoke. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice uncertain. I met her gaze, my own voice flat. "The truth is usually a good place." She flinched. My dad exhaled sharply through his nose. "We messed up." I blinked. I hadn't expected him to say that. My mom stared down at her hands. "Claire, when we told you the trip was postponed, we lied. No excuses. No justifications. Just the truth." I swallowed, my throat tightening. "Why?" She hesitated, then finally said, "We thought it would be easier." Easier. Just like she had texted me. I clenched my jaw. Easier for who? Silence. "For you." I pressed. "For Ryan." A hollow laugh escaped me, because it sure as hell wasn't easier for me. My dad ran a hand over his face, looking suddenly exhausted. "We didn't think it would hurt you this much." I scoffed. "No, you didn't think at all." My mom's voice wavered. "We thought you'd understand." That word again. Understand. The same empty word they had thrown at me in their messages, as if it excused everything. I leaned forward, my voice razor sharp. "Tell me the truth. If I hadn't seen those pictures, would you have ever told me?" Neither of them spoke. That silence? That was my answer. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Do you have any idea what that felt like? Watching you all have fun without me? Knowing I was never even considered." My mom's eyes shimmered with guilt. "Claire, we love you." I shook my head. "You don't treat people you love like that." My dad let out a long sigh, rubbing the back of his neck. "We failed you, sweetheart. We should have been honest." I studied them both, trying to gauge what this apology really meant. "Why are you really here?" I asked. "To apologize? Or to make yourselves feel better?" They hesitated. Then my mom admitted, "Both." At least that was honest. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything that couldn't be undone. Finally, my mom spoke again, her voice quieter. "I don't know how to fix this." I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of years spent as second place. And for the first time, I realized something. I didn't need them to fix it. I just needed them to understand it would never be the same. "I don't know either," I admitted. "But I do know this. I'm not going to be the one to fix it for you." My dad nodded, slow and understanding. My mom wiped at her eyes. "What do we do now?" she asked. I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "That's up to you." They thought an apology would be enough. But apologies don't erase years of being treated like an afterthought. Change. That was the hard part. After they left, I didn't feel relief. Nothing had been fixed. They had admitted the truth. They had apologized. But I had heard apologies before. It was their actions that had always told a different story. And this time, I wasn't interested in words. I wanted proof. For the first time, I didn't reach out first. I didn't send good morning texts. I didn't update them on my life. I didn't check in to see if they needed anything. For the first time, I made them do the work. And at first, nothing happened. Days passed. Then a week. Then 2. And I thought, there it is. The proof I needed. If I wasn't the one putting in the effort, there was no effort at all. I should have known. I should have expected it. But somehow, it still hurt. Then, in the 3rd week, something shifted. It was a random Tuesday when my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the text. "Mom, hey, sweetheart. Just thinking about you. Hope you're doing okay." A part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep the distance. But another part of me, the part that had spent years waiting for any sign that they actually cared, hesitated. I didn't reply. Not right away. The next day, my dad texted, too. "Dad, miss you, kid. Let's get dinner sometime." I stared at the message, emotions colliding inside me. Not because I was ready to let them back in, but because for the first time, they were actually trying. I agreed to dinner. Not because everything was forgiven. Not because I was ready to pretend it hadn't happened, but because I needed to see if they were serious. We met at a quiet restaurant, just the 3 of us. Ryan wasn't there, and that alone told me they had been paying attention. We sat down, and for the first time in years, they asked about me. Not about Ryan. Not about work. Not about whether I could do something for them. Just me. I wasn't sure if it was real. If they truly understood what they had done. If they were actually willing to change, or just trying to repair the damage. But for the first time, they were listening. And that was new. Halfway through dinner, my mom set down her fork, clearing her throat. "We've been thinking a lot about what you said," she admitted. "About how we've treated you." I took a sip of my water, staying silent. She continued, her voice careful, choosing each word deliberately. "And we've realized that we've always assumed you didn't need us the way Ryan did. That because you were strong and independent, we didn't have to put in as much effort." I met my mother's gaze, watching as she swallowed hard. "And now we know that was wrong," she admitted. I glanced at my dad. He nodded, his expression serious. "We see it now, Claire. We do." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. These were the words I had been waiting to hear my entire life. And yet, part of me still didn't believe them. Not yet. By the time dinner ended, something between us had shifted. Not in a dramatic, everything is fixed kind of way, but in a maybe this time they actually mean it way. They still had a long way to go. But for once, they were the ones taking the first steps. And for now, that was enough. Still, words were just words. If they truly wanted to fix things, they would have to prove it. Dinner had gone better than I expected. But I wasn't naive. One conversation wouldn't undo years of being treated like an afterthought. I wasn't looking for a quick fix. I wasn't looking for another empty apology. If my parents truly wanted to change, they had to show me. Their first real test came a week later. My birthday. If history had taught me anything, it was that birthdays in our family had never been fair. Ryan's were always a grand production, parties, expensive gifts, reservations at whatever high-end restaurant he wanted. Mine? A card, maybe a phone call, if they remembered. So this year, I told myself not to expect anything. I told myself it didn't matter. And yet, when I woke up that morning, there was still a small part of me, the part that still hoped, that wondered if maybe, just maybe, things could be different. And this time, they didn't forget. At exactly 10 a.m., there was a knock at my door. I frowned, setting down my coffee. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my parents stood there, holding a cake. I froze. They had never done this before. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," my mom said, offering a tentative smile. I stared at them, my breath catching. "You remembered." My dad let out a small chuckle. "Of course we did." And for once, I believed him. But the biggest surprise? They didn't just drop off the cake and leave. They actually stayed. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a quiet afternoon at my place. Talking, catching up, eating cake that was a little too sweet but perfect because it was mine. There were no rushed goodbyes. No feeling like I was an obligation they had to check off a list. For the first time in a long time, it felt like they wanted to be there. And I hadn't realized how much I needed that until it happened. A few weeks later, they proved it again. I had a big presentation at work, one I had been stressing over for weeks. I had mentioned it in passing over dinner one night, not thinking much of it. But on the morning of the presentation, I got a text from my mom. "Mom, thinking of you today. You're going to do great." A moment later, another message popped up. "Dad, let us know how it goes, kiddo. Proud of you no matter what." I stared at my phone. They had never done this before. I wasn't used to them remembering the little things. And yet, here they were. Trying. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old habits crept back in, when my mom instinctively made excuses for Ryan, when my dad struggled to say more than a few words. But the difference now? They caught themselves. They noticed. They tried to do better. And that mattered. One night, a few months later, my mom called. Not for anything specific. Just to talk. At some point in the conversation, she sighed. "I know it's going to take time," she said carefully, "for you to trust us again." I swallowed hard. "Yeah." A pause. Then, "We're not giving up, Claire. You're too important to us." My throat tightened. Because for the first time, I believed her. For the first time, I finally felt like I mattered. Change didn't happen overnight. There were still moments when I caught myself waiting for them to slide back into their old ways, waiting for them to forget, waiting for the moment they stopped trying. But weeks passed, then months, and they kept showing up. It wasn't effortless. It wasn't perfect. But for the first time, I finally felt seen. One evening, I was sitting on my back porch, sipping tea, when my phone buzzed. A message from my mom. Not an apology. Not a guilt trip. Just a simple text. "Mom, thinking of you. How's your week going?" I stared at the screen, something warm settling in my chest. Because that message? It wouldn't have existed a year ago. A few weeks later, I gave myself a gift. I had been saving for a trip, a solo vacation, just for me. I hadn't told my family much about it, mostly because I didn't want to hear their opinions. But then, one night at dinner, my dad asked, "So, when's your trip?" I blinked. "You remember?" He smirked. "Of course. It's Italy, right?" My mom nodded. "We were actually talking about it the other day. Do you need help with anything? Packing? Planning?" I studied them carefully, waiting for the catch. But there wasn't one. They weren't offering because they wanted something. They were offering because they wanted to be part of my life. And that was new. The night before my flight, I got a text from Ryan. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. "Ryan, Mom won't say it, but she's freaking out about you traveling alone. You know how she is." I rolled my eyes. Typical. Then another message came through. "Ryan, you're actually doing it, huh? Living your life on your own terms." I hesitated before replying. "Yeah, I am." There was a long pause. Then, "Ryan, that's kinda badass, sis." As I stepped off the plane in Rome, I felt the weight of the past year settle over me. I had spent so much of my life waiting for my parents to see me, waiting to be included, waiting for the day I wouldn't feel like an afterthought. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was choosing myself. I had built a life where I didn't have to chase their approval. And somehow, in doing that, they had finally learned how to show up for me. A few days into my trip, I was sitting at a cafe when my phone buzzed. A group message. "Mom, we just saw your latest photos. Rome looks amazing. Call us soon. We miss you." I smiled. Not because I needed their approval, but because, for the first time, they weren't just saying the words. They meant them. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. You shouldn't have to beg for love. You shouldn't have to fight to be included. And if the people around you don't see your worth, choose yourself. Because sometimes, when you stop waiting to be seen, that's when they finally notice.